The senior executive team at Wits released a proposed mandatory vaccination framework, which states that the staff and students who choose not to vaccinate on constitutional grounds will be subject to weekly testing for SARS-CoV-2 infection, irrespective of whether they have COVID-19 symptoms or not, and this at their own cost. So is this practical? Is this fair? Is this feasible? Is the questions that need to be asked. And to answer those questions is Shirona Patel, Communications Manager at Wits University. Assalamu alaikum, Shirona. Welcome to the program and nice to be talking to you.
Wa alaikum assalam, and thanks for having me.
Right, so Shirona, what's the story here then? How practical is this directive from Wits University to the staff and students that are not interested, who are anti-vaxxers for some reason or the other?
So let me just take a step back there. I think there's just some misinterpretation of what was put out. So firstly, this is a proposed policy. It's out for comment at the moment among different constituencies. So we've got a whole process where we have to consult with staff, students, with organized labor, with the Postgraduate Students Association, with helpline to students who work on clinical platforms, for example, etc. So if you look at the Wits community, it's about 40,000 students. We've got about, if you count every single staff member, joint staff, about 15,000 staff members, etc. We've got alumni, we've got school learners who come onto our campus regularly, etc. So the consultation has to be quite wide with all the constituencies. That will happen between now for the next few weeks, and then it will serve, we'll then make the changes to the proposed policy, and then it will go to Senate and Council. So there's still quite a process. We're only in the comment and consultation phase.
Okay, great. So it's not cast in stone as we speak. However, the Wits SRC Secretary General and the SRC are kicking up quite a fuss about this, are they not?
Yeah, so there's two things. The one is we've just had a transition between our SRCs. The last ones ended on Friday, and we've got a brand new SRC as of this Monday. And two of their representatives basically put out that statement. Again, it's not a pro-vaccination but anti-vaccination argument. If you look at their Twitter account about an hour ago, they said they're encouraging all people to vaccinate, but they are concerned that the cost of the weekly test for staff and students who choose not to vaccinate should not be carried by them. They're insisting that the institution should pay for those tests. And their argument is, from what I understand, is that if people are poor or they can't afford it, they won't be able to do these weekly tests.
Okay, so you're raising
counter-argument. Yeah. So there is a counter-argument to that. And the counter-argument is that, number one, the vaccinations are free. Number two, as a scientific institution, do research in it. We know that they work in a community if everybody or the majority of people take it. And number three, we're saying that, in fact, we've had the most number of requests from poor students and disadvantaged students who can't study and learn from home or do online learning because of the digital divide and other issues, who actually want to come onto campus. So coming back to campus and having everyone vaccinated will actually be advantageous for poor and disadvantaged students.
Okay, so as you said, this is not an issue around anti-vaxxers, but then what would be the reason for them not to vaccinate, number one? And number two, what sort of, I'm sure you guys have already started applying your minds to how you can move forward on this issue, taking into account that most students will not be able to afford, going weekly to a clinic to pay for those tests and also transporting themselves there and possibly also missing out on lecture time, etc. So what would the scenario be then?
So I think we're asking the wrong questions again. I think that's not the question. The majority of students and staff that have been canvassed, if you I've sat in on multiple consultations over the past week, the majority want to be vaccinated. So that's the first thing, and vaccinations are free. So, I mean, that's the first part. The SRC is one component or one input of that. If you speak to the Postgraduate Students Association, who represents 40% of our students, they're actively encouraging vaccination and are in support of the policy. So I think it will be a minority of people who don't vaccinate. And there could be three or four different reasons from what we gather why people won't vaccinate. The first is on medical grounds, and that would be understandable that if they have other medical conditions that don't allow them to vaccinate, they won't. And that's a reasonable kind of input that they could have. The second is that people could object on constitutional grounds. And then we're saying, well, we need to weigh up the rights of the individual versus the rights of the community. And in that instance, we're saying, well, you can still come onto campus, but you have to be screened and you have to go for these tests. So that's the second. The cost of it and who pays for it will come in the implementation phase. And so we'll listen to all the inputs. It will be considered. And the final policy will be decided in November, end of November, December, for implementation next year.
Okay, so Shirona, I hear you, and I also hear that you have suggested I'm asking all the wrong questions. But I ask these questions based on the statement that we received from the Wits SRC, obviously the SRC, and I do know that you are suggesting that there are a whole host of different role players here, and we can't take the SRC's concerns in isolation. But clearly they feel very strongly about it, be they a minority voice in the greater scheme of things. But we do need to give them a voice, we do need to hear what they're saying, and we do need to have a contingency in plan. And that's where I'm coming from. What would be the contingency, very especially as one of the big issues that they raise is the cost. So whether they refuse to take the vaccine due to medical conditions or religious issues or whatever it is, and they can't afford to take the weekly tests, how does the university then propose to assist them in this regard?
So, Julie, the question is, why should the onus be on the university to do that? If they're not happy with coming to Wits or by abiding by Wits' policies, there are different options for people who want to do it. It doesn't mean that they have to come to it. We're not forcing them to come to this university. But we're saying, for example, at Wits, if we've got a smoking policy and you're not allowed to smoke in buildings, and you are a smoker, or we say we are a smoke-free campus. We have a smoke-free campus at Health Sciences. So it's a smoke-free campus. This is our policy. You may be a smoker, but you're not allowed here. So we've got those policies in place. And if you want to smoke, you come here on campus. So that it's the same thing, if council does approve that, and they say this is the policy, people can choose not to come in. And be comfortable with that. They have a choice. There's 26 public institutions in the country. They have a choice to go to another institution. They have a choice to sit at home, not vaccinate, to do online learning or distance learning anytime. That's a choice they have. So people do have choices, and there are consequences for those choices. But just as we would implement any other policy, we've got a policy against gender-based harm, for example. We're saying you come onto campus and treat women in any way that you like. If you don't like it and you don't like our policies around this, by all means, you're welcome to go somewhere else. So I think we have to be quite clear on that. Where it's reasonable, for example, on medical grounds, where people cannot take a vaccination due to medical reasons, etc. That's something that I think we have to accommodate. But what we'd have to do is, like I said, these are all discussions that we're having. We will consider each and every input, including the SRC's input. My point on the SRC is, yes, they are one input, but also canvass the views of the majority of staff and students out there. Look at the tweets and the comments and the quote tweets that went against the SRC statement that put out. And you see that if you just count the number of tweets there, you would clearly see that there's the majority of students and staff, I think, at Wits University would want to be vaccinated, would want to get back to normal as soon as possible.
Great. Hear you loudly and clearly, and obviously it is in everyone's best interest that the majority of not only the Wits campus, but the majority of South Africans do the right thing by going out, vaccinating and protecting themselves and their loved ones. Shirona Patel, Communications Manager at Wits University, shukran indeed for talking with us this morning.
Okay, thank you.
8:36 exactly. Once again, we're going for an ad break. When we get back, Maulana Mohammed Mutala is going to talk to us about his recent Umrah trip.